When I was shutting down projectors and closing down the movie theater around 2 in the morning, I shut off the one projector and turned around to see one theater starting to play Insidious from the beginning without previews. It was extremely out of place considering the projectors are programmed for the movies to start automatically with the 20-minute previews built in. No show was scheduled on the computer, and I still don't know how it started, but I locked myself in the office for the rest of the night. A phone used to call me on 911 every night, make horrible screaming sounds or sometimes white noise, and then disconnect. It scared the living hell out of me. The officers we sent out every time never found a thing. It was vacant, but there was a residence there, and I was repeatedly assured that the sounds on the line were due to a faulty phone line or the rain, but it never stopped bothering me. I worked a security gig in an abandoned hotel, which sat directly on the river. When the rooms had balconies, they would hang out over the water. The hotel had closed down and had been stripped bare by the owners. I'm sitting in the office, and I hear a creak, 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 from left to right on the floor above me. The hotel was wood frame and creaked like a house when someone walked around. This sounded exactly like someone walking the hall on the floor directly above the office. I go up to the next level and into the hall. The hotel itself was only 4 floors high, but long. The hall was bare walls, rooms with no doors, and only a single dim light bulb hanging from the ceiling in the middle of the hall. I have seen my share of horror movies, and know this can only be trouble, but I start walking down the hall anyway. After all, it's my job to keep people out. I get about a quarter way down the hall, and I hear rustling coming from a room. I draw my mag light and get ready to use it. I slowly peek into the room and discover that it's the wind blowing in from the river and moving a curtain. Now freaked, I start checking the other floors and find nothing, but I know someone is in the building. I make my way back down to the ground floor, still finding nothing, and go into the old ballroom. It's a wide open space. Out of the corner of my eye, I see someone moving, so I turn and shine my light on them, ready to defend myself. That's when I realized that it was my reflection in a broken mirror on the wall. After that, I noped the hell out of there and spent the rest of the night in my car in the parking lot. About 2 weeks after that, the place burned down. After all this time, I'm still convinced that someone was in the building, but I never found any evidence that there was. When I used to work overnights in retail, we had some freaky things happen. One night, the doors to the emergency exits started rattling like crazy, like someone had grabbed them and was shaking them as hard as they could. Me and my coworker freaked out and ran to our supervisor to report it, but security found nothing when they went to check it out. Another time, I felt someone tap me on my shoulder, and I turned around, thinking it was a coworker. There was no one there. Working overnight security, I noticed a woman standing in the middle of the parking lot staring at the security camera. When I went outside to tell her she had to leave, she said nothing and handed me a note. The note said something along the lines of, "They are listening to us. Don't say anything. If you or your commander can help me, just shake your head." Me being the only person there, I told her again she had to leave. Instead, she stood there for another 15 minutes staring into the camera. I called the police, but she was gone before they got there. Working in a nursing home through the night always has its moments. Unexplained noisy shadows, etc. Although the only time I've crapped myself was an elderly lady flicking the lights on and off down the hallway while singing Amazing Grace. I saw someone get on an elevator as I came around a corner. I said, "Hold the door," as the door started to close. It opened back like someone had hit the button. When I got to the elevator, there was no one in it. After that, many times just as I came around that corner, the elevator door would open, and no one was in the elevator. I had not pushed a call button or anything. I would always say thanks when I got on the empty elevator. I used to work at City Hall a few years ago as a security guard. There were abandoned jail cells in the basement that haven't been used in years. Part of my duties was to patrol them for any squatters. It was probably my second time patrolling alone, and things started to get really weird. I went down to the old prison holding cells. It's a long, narrow hallway about 6 meters wide and 100 meters long with cells on both sides. The hallway was lit with light bulbs hanging from the ceiling. I was walking past the fourth column of cells when the lights went out. I turned my flashlight on and walked back toward the light switch. Right when I was about to turn them back on, the lights flickered on again. I thought to myself, I'm getting out of here. I started walking fast, past the cells while quickly checking them. I was about halfway when the lights went off again. I heard 2 cells slam. I ran with my flashlight straight toward the other end of the hallway. I reached the end and ran up to my workstation. I then called my supervisor and asked him if there were any electrical issues that have been reported. He said no. I had 2 hours left on my shift and couldn't leave. I was at my workstation paranoid as hell. I used to work as a night watchman on a large property. Not just a big building, but a large surrounding property as well, probably 50 acres. Well, this property was not in the best of areas. It was kind of secluded, but had a subdivision nearby. Anyways, it had a really long driveway that was gated. One night, I start my rounds by walking out the front door of the place, which was all lit up. As soon as I lock the door behind me and take a step, I hear a woman's voice scream, "Oh my God, somebody please help me," up at the end of the driveway. It was somewhat faint, and I took 5 running steps into the driveway, skidded to a stop, and ran back inside to call the cops. They responded with multiple police cars and even a helicopter. They found absolutely nothing. I still think it could have been someone trying to lure me out there. When I had just graduated high school, I started working at a truck stop a few miles outside of town. I usually worked evenings, but I had to switch shifts with the night shift guy, so there I was at 3 a.m. fighting sleep. A car pulls into the parking lot and parks. There's a guy in the driver's seat, crying, and a woman in the passenger seat just staring straight ahead. Not moving, no emotion whatsoever. They sat there for what seemed like an hour. Then the guy gets out and comes in. He grabs a few random items and puts them on the counter. The whole time he is looking all around, checking for other people. There was no one but us, for miles. He then stares right into my very soul and says, "It's quiet out here, isn't it? So quiet you can almost hear the angels singing." I muttered something unmemorable, and he left. She never moved. I work at a hospital overnight. I was cleaning 2 rooms after patients left. They were connected. There was one exit. I cleaned the first room, left for 10 minutes, got my supplies, and went back to the other. I saw a little old lady in a chair, hunched over. I stared at her for a few seconds, thought it was odd they put a patient in already. 2 female nurses asked if I was sitting in the chair. They get scared. Nope, it was an old lady. Well, I check. Room is empty. She disappeared. I would have seen if she walked past me. Creepy. No one on the floor fit the description I gave of her, except the lady who died in the room 4 hours before my shift. I work at a crisis nursery, which is a child care facility that provides emergency and respite care for children under the age of 7. I used to work graveyards all the time. I have to say first that I am absolutely a non-believer in paranormal stuff. At all. That being said, At 2 in the morning in a dark room, when you and 2 or 3 other girls in their 20s are the only adults in the building, stuff gets creepy sometimes. Now the facility I work in was named for a child that was beaten to death by one of their parents. The nursery was started in their name as a way to hopefully prevent another child dying a violent death at the hands of a stressed out caregiver. So the story that goes around is that this kid's spirit haunts the nursery and is mostly active at night. I get told this on one of my first grave shifts, and I'm like, whatever. Scare the newbie. That stuff doesn't really bother me. Well, later that night, one of the kids got up to use the bathroom. One of my coworkers helped the kid back to bed and returned to where we were all sitting. Pretty soon, someone hears the water running in the bathroom. They go check it out. Yep, it's running. The coworker swears up and down that it was off when she and the kid left. Kind of weird. But I honestly think they were just trying to scare me. Well, they tell me that one of the reasons that everyone thinks this place is haunted is that many different people have reported different children asking about that kid, as in, why doesn't that kid have to go to bed? While they're pointing at nothing, I brush it off, basically forget about it. A few weeks later, I was in the sleep room, the bedroom where all the kids sleep. There must always be an adult in the room with the children by myself. I'm just chilling, reading a book with a book light. The rest of the room is pitch black and silent. All of a sudden, this kid, probably 4 or 5, sits bolt upright in bed and says, "Hey, how come they aren't asleep? Why do they get to play? I want to play too." All while pointing at a wall with no kids anywhere in the vicinity. Instant crazy shivers all over me. I was so scared I almost screamed. I refused to be alone in there from that moment on. I work as a transporter in a hospital. About 2 years ago, we moved from the old city hospital into a new state-of-the-art facility. The old hospital was built in the 1930s and was showing its age, and at night was just plain creepy. Each floor had an east and west wing. The east wing of the 4th floor was the first wing to be shut down about 2 weeks before the move. One night, I'm up on the floor to get a patient from the west wing. I see a small group of nurses and aides who all used to work on the now closed east wing. They looked visibly shaken. I walked over to see if everything was okay. They told me that they had decided to walk through their old wing for nostalgia's sake. When they were over there, the phone at the nurse's station started ringing. The computers and phones had not yet been moved. Not sure what to do, one of the nurses reached over the counter and answered the phone. The nurse told me there was a woman's voice on the other end and that she sounded confused. Then the line went dead. That's when the nurse finally looked at the screen on the phone to see where the call was coming from. The phone gave the room number directly next to the nurse's station. The rooms by this point had all been cleared out and the phones removed. They could see directly into the room and see that there was nobody in there. That's when they bolted toward the west wing, where I was getting off the elevator. I avoided that wing for the rest of my time there. So when I was first married, the hubby and I rented an old house. I'm talking old enough that the bathroom was added in later. So one day we are both in our bedroom getting ready for date night. On the other side of our bedroom wall was the dining room, where a large solid wood dining table sat pretty close to the wall. We heard nothing strange, but when we left the room, the dining table was sitting in front of the hallway entrance. We should definitely have heard it being pushed across the wood floor, but hadn't heard a thing. We moved the table back, it made lots of noise, and we checked all doors and windows. Everything was locked up tight. We were the only 2 people in the house. We both also heard strange sounds in that place, and experienced our kids' toys rolling and making noise on their own on occasion. As a kid, I was rollerblading on the street next to a very deep drop-off ravine. Something grabbed me that I couldn't see and pulled me down the ravine. As I struggled to climb up, something invisible kept pulling on my feet. After about 2 hours of kicking, screaming, and climbing, I finally made it back up. I never went by that ravine again. So it was the summer between 4th and 5th grade. The backyard was all dirt because we switched from septic to sewer. One night there was heat lightning, which is very rare for Washington State, and I looked out my window from my bed, and my dog starts to growl. Then the flash from the lightning happened. There was someone looking in my room. I got up and ran as my dog flipped out and soon ran out after me. My dad went and looked and called the police. There were no footprints in the dirt near my window except for my dad's. Long story short, I was at my dad's house, still a teenager. Dad left to go to a doctor's appointment while I was getting ready for school. Go into the bathroom where I have a mirror that goes to the floor. My dog was freaking out, so I let him in the bathroom with me while I was doing my hair in the mirror. I looked down at my dog, and he is sitting down, ears pinned back, but his reflection was standing, panting, and wagging his tail. I look to my reflection, and I stare in horror as my reflection is smiling back at me, and my gums grow over my teeth, so all you can see is gums and braces. And then my eyes sunk into black holes, and I ran out of the house. I was never bothered again. I remember as a kid, I've grown up in some pretty haunted houses. I remember this one time me and my little brother were in the living room watching Wallace and Gromit, and the power cut out throughout the home. It was about around 3 in the morning, seeing how it was summer and my grandma was out walking the dogs. She always took them out at night to avoid people. So we immediately hide under the covers, and we are on separate couches. I could hear someone snoring super loud, and it was just me and my younger brother. I asked him, "Is that you?" He replied with no, and as he said it, it got louder. Then we could hear whispering coming from all around us. It was really scary for us kids and continued on like this for a while, at least 10 minutes before my grandma got home. She told us the power was out on the whole block. There was always something wrong with that house. Nobody liked it, and people would get weird feelings in there like someone's there with them. I've had many experiences with unexplained entities and whatnot, and I am a strong believer. Even to this day, me and my brother have no clue what that was. Still creeps me out. I was trying to sleep one night, upset over the very recent death of a close friend. I had my back to the door when I felt the mattress give, as if someone had just sat down on the edge. I turned my head to tell the cat to get out, only to see and remember that I had shut the door. There was no one there. Cleaning my parents' pub one morning, bent down to empty the Hoover, and in the corner of my eye, I saw a pair of shiny black shoes and suit trousers walk past me. Stood up to look, and no one was there. Told my dad, and he laughed. A few mornings later, same thing. Told my dad, and again he laughed. A few nights later, after lockup, my dad sat at the end of the bar, cashing up with the dog sitting at the side of him. All of a sudden, the dog's hairs stand up and off. He runs to the bottom room of the pub and starts barking and snarling. Dad gets up to check. No one got left behind, and no one is there, but the dog's going proper mental. Don't think he ever ran up those stairs as fast as he did that night. My parents' home is haunted, so I have felt presences for years. Most recently, I went to my parents' house for our usual Tuesday dinner with family. My daughter was over before I was, playing with her grandfather. Everyone seemed a bit not themselves when I got there. I sat in the living room, decompressing from work, when I caught something out of the corner of my eye. I look over near the staircase where a lot of things have happened paranormally and see a beige scarf float by and disappear. I mention it to my dad and everybody freezes up. My mother tells me of noises going on in the kitchen earlier when no one was in there. My dad and daughter tell me they heard a few weird noises, like a moan happened earlier. Was a quiet dinner that day. A couple of months ago, my brother from another mother had recently lost his grandmother. We were talking about his grandfather in his kitchen one morning who passed away a while ago, when me and him both heard the sound of a full-grown woman crying in the back where she passed away. The only person back there was a sleeping little girl, who could never sound like that. We both kinda just sat there after he checked to make sure it wasn't the little girl. Needless to say, we both did not want to go into his room to check that out. One morning, I was still sleeping and my husband was in the shower. I felt someone grab my ankle while I was laying in bed, but when I looked, there was no one in the room with me, and my hubby was still in the shower. He told me that he has seen a shadowy old woman go into our room many times, but I haven't seen it. After the ankle grab, I felt like my attitude was very mean for a couple of days after the incident. One summer, my best friend and I rented The Exorcist from Blockbuster. We went back to my house to watch it, just us. As we are watching the movie, we heard footsteps upstairs right above us. I looked over at my best friend wide-eyed and clearly freaked out. She laughed at me and said that it was just Judge, my dog. That's when I told her that Judge was right behind where she was sitting. We bolted from the house and ran down my gravel rock driveway, barefoot, and all the way down the road to her house. I was cleaning an old abandoned school, and my boss would come and check on me often. One time, I heard footsteps and someone calling my name. I went looking for him, but he never was there. His truck wasn't outside. Sometimes I'd hear footsteps and something slapping the wall. But one time I was mopping the cafeteria, and I had a broom propped up on a table. I had it so it wouldn't fall down because I hate bending over to pick something up. I turned around, and 5 minutes later, it slammed on the floor super hard. Later on after that, I was bent over cleaning up something, and I felt something tap my shoulder. No one is ever with me when I work there. That's my first and oldest paranormal experience so far. Just yesterday, my mom and I were unloading the dishwasher, and we stood there talking for a moment, and then we both heard a clatter behind me. One of our soup spoons was on the floor, but there was no way it could have ended up there. The dishwasher had just been emptied, and there were no spoons on the counter. This isn't the first thing that's happened. Whatever's in my house, it steals little things and puts them in places we searched. We hear footsteps, people speaking, but we're unable to make out the words. I just wish there was a rational explanation. I would think it was an auditory hallucination, if not for the fact both me and my mother have experienced the same things, often together. I used to have a manga book sitting behind 2 decks of playing cards, leaned against the wall. I started talking to a friend about a supposed ghost in my house, and that book flipped over the cards without touching them. No wind in the room, nothing. Just flipped and fell onto my desk. Next day, I had a giant picture in my hallway that fell and managed to flip off the light switch. Needless to say, those were the 2 most weirdest nights of my life. Two experiences. Once as a little girl, alone in bed at night. At the end of my bed, it creaked and sloped in like someone was sitting there. I was scared. I just rolled over and fell asleep. Also, when I was a teenager, I saw my grandfather's shadow appear on the wall from the lamp in the living room. He was sitting in a chair. I always regretted not walking down the hall to see closer. I was living alone and always kept my doors and windows locked and my bedroom door shut while I was sleeping. I remember waking up in the middle of the night and seeing someone in the corner of my bedroom. The door was still shut, I always kept my bedside light on, so I had no trouble seeing the outline of a young guy. He had a dark t-shirt, jeans, and colorful tattoo sleeves on each arm, brown sort of shaggy hair, and blue or green eyes. He didn't make eye contact with me, but had his hands in his pockets, looking around as if waiting for something. I could feel my tired brain trying to understand what I was seeing, thinking I was dreaming. I tried to be very still. Before I knew it, he was gone. He didn't walk out or move, he just disappeared. I went back to sleep, and for some reason never tried to look into who had lived in the building before me, or if anything had happened in my apartment. I never saw him again and hadn't felt threatened, so I didn't worry much about it. I did sleep with the bedroom light on for the rest of the time I lived there, though. I was at the Ohio University Ridges in one of the buildings when I saw light coming from under the door. I checked the door, and it was locked, so I laid down on the floor and stuck my phone under the door and took a picture. When I looked at the picture, my phone had been cracked. A slim line from the very top of my phone to the very bottom. I don't know how that happened. My phone never left my hand. My brother's previous rental was haunted by a ghost. We, me, my brother, and his roommates, named it Betsy, and it mostly just did annoying things like rearranging the dishes, or putting the old curtains that came with the house back up when my brother tried to replace them. The most anomalous thing that Betsy did was repair a shattered mirror in the basement, within a few hours of us discovering that there was a shattered mirror in the basement. If you enjoyed these stories and want to hear more creepy tales, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any upcoming videos. Share this video with your friends and comment below. Which of these creepy stories gave you the creeps and chills? I would love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for watching and for your continued support on the channel.